Okay, good morning everybody, and thank you for joining today's DSO Functions event. Before we start, I'll just go through some housekeeping. We do ask that you keep your microphones muted as we go through the presentations, and having cameras off does help just with the events and the kind of bandwidth there. And we do have the chat feature available, so we do welcome questions and we will have a Q&A at the end. So please feel free to drop your questions in there. And so that everyone's aware, the webinar will be recorded and shared on our website. On today's agenda, you'll hear from Christos Kalaudis on the DFES, Gavin Anderson on the Network Development Plan, Ian Povey will be discussing the data portal, and Kate Stewart on flexible services. And at the end, we'll open for a Q&A. During today's event, we'll be utilising polls. So just as a bit of a test, we'd like to know, have you attended one of our DSO Functions events previously? Now, teams can be slightly different for each individual depending on which version you're using. So you might see it as a pop-up on your screen. If you don't see it as a pop-up, if you could head over to the chat, you'll see it's available there. We've got a good chunk of people that are first time for this type of event, and some returning attendees, which is great.
Charlotte, I'm only able to actually attend for an hour. I've got an internal team brief meeting to attend, which I'm chairing.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you for joining, though.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now I will hand over to Christos.
Thanks, Lottie. Good morning, all. I'm Christos Kalaudis, Capacity Strategy Lead with Electricity Northwest, and I'm going to talk to you about our distribution future electricity scenarios, or DFES, and our more specific around our latest publication, our DFES 2022, and the key learnings out of them. So what is DFES? DFES is a set of long-term forecasts. It's a set of scenarios that we use to forecast in the longer term electricity demand, distributed generation, and battery storage. Stakeholder engagement is in the core of this process because we need to capture the plans in our forecasts. And it's important to highlight that DFES is the forecast that we use to inform the development of our network. So the DFES is what drives our future requirements of flexibility services, what drives the capacity that we release through network reinforcement, so that we make sure that these volumes of EVs, heat pumps, distributed generation in the future, for all of these volumes coming to the network, we have the available capacity where and when needed. So we produce bottom-up forecasts of demand and generation. There's a lot of information and data in the DFES report and in the data workbook. And there's also a lot of insights that we share. In the last publication, we can see even a section talking about how the local area energy plan that our local stakeholders and local authorities produce are facilitated through our load-related investment process, and the role that DFES plays and how DFES interacts with these LIPs. So in DFES 2022, we use the same scenario that we used in the last publication, but with pretty much the similar assumptions. There is updated drivers for all of them because there are technology changes in the whole landscape, the socioeconomic landscape, and all these are reflected. So a high-level view of the scenarios is what you see in this slide. On the left-hand side, you can see the 4 scenarios that most of you would be more familiar because it's the common scenario, the scenarios of the common scenario framework that is adopted by all DNOs and National Grid ESO. And these scenarios, you if you go to any DFES of all DNOs and the FES, and in our DFES, you can find the same assumptions, let's say for high EV uptake, for example, at leading the way scenario across all of these publications. The numbers might be different because they are informed by different processes and different data available to each organization. We try to standardize this process, so we share, as DNOs, we share information with National Grid so that they can inform the national scenarios through more local information from the DFES. But you pretty much can see similar trends, so high uptakes or low uptakes in the corresponding scenarios. On the right-hand side, you can see our best use scenario and the high-level assumptions framework for this scenario. This scenario follows the same definition across all DNOs, and the short version of this definition is that the best use scenario is the one that captures the highest certainty assumptions in a 1 to 10 years horizon. And in the longer term, we can't really talk about high certainty, so it follows a central view of future trends. So these are the 5 scenarios that we produced. You can find data for all of these scenarios. And talking about data, there is graphs and insights discussed and presented in the report. But you can see the whole range of our DFES data in there. You can access it in our DFES workbook. So you can see at the bottom of this slide the numbers. So it's really a lot of data sets. So it's 34 data sets. We have information around distributed generation, so information around capacities, energy generated for different generation types, for photovoltaics, wind generation, other types of generation. There's also information around electricity demand. And when we talk about electricity demand, as this electricity distribution company, we are very much interested to understand the annual peak demand, so the maximum demand that our networks need to supply. So you can find information around the peak demand, the minimum demand, the annual energy consumptions of electricity. You can also see insights in some of the detailed components, so how much demand we have from EVs and heat pumps, how many volumes of EVs and heat pumps we forecast, as well as how the baseline domestic and non-domestic demand is forecasted. There's also information that is used in our network planning, so you can see information across all scenarios around flexibility service requirements. So this is effectively our requirements in terms of capacity in megawatts and energy in megawatt hours, of how much of these services we want to procure to secure capacity in the future for our networks. The time horizon for these scenarios is up to 2050, and in terms of granularity, you can see the DFES is a document that targets a wide audience. So you can find information, for example, down to council level and county councils, and we can go to more granular forecasts down to BSP and primary substation feeding areas. So, for example, when we talk about primary substation, it's pretty much splitting the whole of Northwest, our license area, into around 400 sections. This is a slide that shows at a glance how our best view compares with last year's. The first row is the electricity demand consumption. It's slightly higher. This is driven by, we can see some more details around the scenarios in other slides, but it's at high level. The higher demand growth that we expect, that we have high certainty, is driven by a higher certainty in slightly higher volumes of heat pumps, but we've also seen that our baseline or starting year demand bounced back from the pandemic a bit higher than what we expected. So this is what drives this first aspect. In terms of EVs, we pretty much expect similar volumes. For heat pumps, we had new policy drivers like some government incentives that we modeled last year. In terms of components in our forecast where we see a reduction compared to last year, it's distributed generation is one of them, and it's because we see some some delays. We see some issues. So for some large projects, for example, that we have some transmission constraints, and we expect some of these projects to progress at a later stage or not progress. And this also applies to batteries, where we see a slightly reduced uptake trend as our highest certainty view. I will go and see some high-level trends from this year's forecasts across different forecasting components. This slide is around peak electricity demand. You can see that there is a continuous growth in the first years. This is driven by, in the forthcoming 10 years, by the electrification of transport. And also there are several hotspots in our area where we see more growth, like city centre of Manchester. We have some parts of Lancashire that we have more demand growth. So there is some local trends, but there's also an overall driver from the electrification of transport as well. Moving forward, you can see that there is a wide range of demand growth projections, and the key driver for this, for an acute increase in the leading the way and the consumer transformation scenarios, is really a much higher adoption of heat pumps in a world where hydrogen is not playing a dominant role in domestic heating. So we'll know more around that from the outcome of the hydrogen village trials. So we expect a UK government decision by 2026 to have a higher certainty around the future of hydrogen in domestic heating. So at the moment, we need to consider a wide range in our planning. So this range is pretty much telling us that for any decision that we make now around investing in the network and releasing capacity, we need to take into account that we don't foreclose a future need of much higher demand growth. Second slide around trends. This is around electric vehicles. You can see that for most of the scenarios, we can see high certainty of expecting high growth in the following 10 years. This trend is about all plug-in cars and vans. So this excludes heavy goods vehicles and buses. It includes plug-in hybrids and pure electric vehicles. We have high certainty that by after 2025 to 2026, the whole life cycle cost of adopting an EV compared to a conventional internal combustion engine vehicle will be pretty much equal. So in other words, it means that towards the end of this decade, we expect that from a customer choice point of view, an EV will be even more attractive from a conventional petrol or diesel vehicle. We also have policies modeled in the best view and our consumer transformation scenarios around the government policies for banning the sale of ICE vehicles by 2030 and plug-in hybrids by 2035. But our latest, but in DFES 2022, it's worth noting that we've seen that it's the customer's decision is not driven purely by policies. It's driven by the reduced cost of batteries and the cost of EVs, and also it's driven by the access to EV charging. So it's important if we want to make sure that we facilitate this transition, and we are not a blocker as a DNO to see these EVs, that we continue releasing capacity to facilitate a wide adoption of EV chargers to not be a blocker for the uptake of EV volumes. In terms of heat pumps, you can see similarly to what we've seen for peak demand growth, you can see in the longer term that there's a wide range of forecasts, because there are huge uncertainties around the future role of hydrogen in domestic heating. In the short term, we believe that our network, our area is not, parts of our area is not going to be we are not going to have the first adopters of heat pumps. And this is because we have high coverage by the gas grid. So we don't expect for these areas that we'll have the first adopters. And also compared to the national average, we also have higher levels of poverty compared to other parts of the country. Moving away from demand technologies to distributed generation technologies, photovoltaics is one of the key technologies combined with onshore wind that we expect in the future to accelerate decarbonization in our area. You can see graphs around domestic and non-domestic. When it comes to non-domestic photovoltaics, the growth in the next 5 years is mainly informed by the pipeline that we see. In our consumer transformation, we expect that over nearly 2 giga of additional PV before 2040. This gives us the fastest decarbonization among our scenarios. It's important to highlight that these volumes let's say this is a forecast. DFES is a forecast, so this is more like our best view of what's going to happen and the range of what is going to happen. But if we want to secure the transition to net zero in our region, a key message to our stakeholders is that they need to speed up their actions around decarbonizing the generation and go even beyond these trends. This slide shows battery uptakes. Battery storage is a key technology for the transition, for UK's transition to net zero. We expect a lot of offshore wind, mainly connected to transmission networks, a lot of photovoltaics and onshore wind connected to distribution networks. So compared to previous technologies, like in a past power system that was heavily dominated by coal power plants and big thermal units, we now have a lot of dispersed intermittent sources with stochastic output, really. So it's really a key technology to have a lot of batteries so that we can make sure that to deal with the stochastic nature of photovoltaics and renewables. So you can see there's a big pipeline in our connections. We expect a longer term growth here. The longer term trends are also informed by other works like what we see in National Grid DSO DFES around the future mix of transmission connected generation and how much storage is required. But it's also technology where we see that for some large projects there are transmission constraints, and it's a challenge to properly connect these technologies in an efficient way to facilitate transition to net zero. Moving away from the different technologies, this slide is showing the interactions between local area energy plans and our load-related investment plan process. You can see our load-related investment process in the horizontal line at the bottom. So we start with forecasting. So we need to understand the needs and when and where we'll have these needs. Then to do that, we start from forecasting, then we do the network impact analysis. Then we need to do, when we identify a need, we do optioneering across different solutions. So we have a flexibility first approach where we start from flexibility services. And if it's not a cost efficient way to provide the capacity required, then we deploy network reinforcement where and when needed. And our final step is to invest on what we call load-related investment. So to invest on flexibility procurement or reinforce the network. So throughout this process, you can see an arrow going from top to bottom that is really that any plans from local area energy plans, any action plans, so plans that have secure funding, they have some strong backing from local and central government, there is ongoing development, these feed directly into our forecast, and in this way, we make sure that these plans, we can facilitate these plans because our load-related investment plan considers these plans. At the same time, through all this process of our load-related investment, we share a lot of information and data and insights with local area energy planners, with local authorities and local stakeholders. So starting from the left, DFES informs more around can provide forecasting data to LAPs. We also publish our NDP capacity headroom, forecast in our network development plan that Gavin will talk to you later. And this information can provide some technical insights to local area energy planners. We also share, we also put our flexibility service requirements out to tender, and this supports local energy markets. And there's also information around costs, like what we put in our latest price control submission that pretty much says that for this demand growth, progress in electrification of transport, heating, renewables in our network, this is the network investment required. So you can find more information around how this process works in our DFES, and it's important to highlight that DFES is really the vehicle to model all inputs from LAPs and make sure that we facilitate these LAPs. So a lot of exciting things coming ahead as part of the country's and Northwest transition to net zero. From our side, Electricity Northwest is a facilitator of net zero in the Northwest. So we are going to release capacity where and when needed to facilitate all of decarbonization plans of our stakeholders and customers. Exciting things coming ahead around their technology changes, there is policy changes, there's a lot of things happening as you can see here. So there are new policies to incentivize electrification of transport, electrification of heating. There's huge potential for the country as well. And beyond that, there is more things than this. There is things around, we have more certainty that heavy good vehicles are going to have a more dominant role in the landscape for, we'll have far more electric trucks in a future mix of heavy duty vehicles. So DFES is a continuous process, and yeah, there's more things to be captured in our next DFES. Thank you very much.
Right then, hopefully that's you can all hear me, and I've got control of the slides, which it looks like I do. So thank you there, Christos. So good morning, everyone. My name is Gavin Anderson, and I'm the Network Strategy and Compliance Planning Manager for Electricity Northwest. I'm here to give you a short overview of our refreshed network development plan for 2023. I'll look to cover through these slides in around sort of 10 to 15 minutes, but please feel free to drop any questions into the chat and pass any feedback, as it's always welcome from all participants. I do have a few questions and polls in my presentation, which, if the technology works, hopefully Charlotte will be able to drop them in as we go along. And I think the first one is just at the end of this first slide, Charlotte. Hey, there we go, it's working. So we've got, where are we up to? Not very familiar, 60%, somewhat familiar, 17, fairly familiar, around 10%, very familiar, 10%. So yeah, so there's a few people out there who've seen, so hopefully we can help to get some people who are not so familiar with it a bit more familiar. Excellent. So first I'd like to sort of provide a bit of a history and a context as to how we sort of developed our NDP and where we are today. So back in February 2020, a project was commenced across the industry to improve how DNOs signpost network capacity shortfalls and forecast network requirements, with a specific intent as to how they publish this to the wider market. DNO has currently produced two main reports, a long-term development statement, which provides information on our existing network and availability of capacity in the very short term. And obviously, as you just heard from Christos, our DFES scenarios, and that provides a longer-term forecast of future energy pathways out into the sort of 2050 realm, in order to capture the envelope of uncertainties as our network develops. So what was required was a plan to cover these in the medium term. It was originally proposed that a standard network capacity report would address this and help industry stakeholders by providing insights into future network headroom. And this would enable connections to locate in the most advantageous areas and identify where these issues occur and develop targeted mitigations. While this was being developed, BEIS, as they were at the time, issued a bit of a draft license condition in August 2020 and asked for the GB implementation of the EU Clean Energy Package. And this required DNOs to produce a network development plan, which is where we are today, which would include the DNO's plan for reinforcement and the use of flexibility service, and then sort of show that in a sort of 5 to 10 year window, which is the medium term sort of look. So this then led us to produce and publish our first NDP report back last year in May. We're effectively required to update this report every 2 years, make sure we cover that 5 to 10 year window during the time. And also pick up a few other bits around the methodology and how we come up with the answer, and also bring that down. And it covers all elements through generation, load, taking up our scenarios and down to 11 kV sort of level within our network. The network development plan statement has been broken into 3 distinct parts. So namely as I said, the network headroom reporting, which sort of looks into sort of connections, reinforcement, flexible services. The network development sort of infrastructure, flexibility services part, which is in the actual development secondary part. And the third part is around just the methodology reporting, is sort of, how was it made, including some of the assumptions that we made and, how we got to where we've got to. And I think there's another poll at this point, Charlotte, if you could hit the button. So this, obviously, if you haven't read our NDP, this may be a difficult question to ask, but if you have had a look at it, we'd love to hear what you think about it. Well, so we've got quite a large chunk in the middle, and 1 or 2 certainly a few satisfied customers, and some people very dissatisfied. Right? Okay, well that's some great feedback. Then we'll have to understand what that's about and see what we can do. So this year, as next year, the next bi-yearly update is due in 2024. So we published in 22. So every 2 years we should be doing that. We've focused this year just refreshing the workbook element part of our NDP, with the latest forecast data that Christos's team have pulled together. This was thought to be a sort of a pragmatic approach and allows for our VOED2 plan to crystallise over the next 12 months as we move from the submission and approval stage that we've been in at the tail end of ED1 to the detailed design, planning and execution of the required elements we identified and submitted as part of our plan in the early years of the VOED2 period. Moving on to a bit of the sort of methodology. So, our methodology document, which is part of the NDP publication, provides a good overview of the end-to-end process. So we forecast our various parameters for each scenario out to 2050. So it allows us to arrive at an overview of the future picture of the network. Inputs are included from key stakeholders and a forecast on LCTs, so EV and heat pump uptake and volumes, as well as generation and storage capacities are also included in that mix as well. We factor in the demand, consumption, peak demand, and all that's layered together to give us this overview of the network, which then allows us to plan accordingly to meet the challenge. This plan can and does evolve over time, obviously, and we amend it as we go forward. And again, at the biannual refresh, we'll certainly revisit our methodology and make sure that we've got the right strategy to move that forward. So what this has led to is part of our one part we're working on at the moment. So we fed all those critical inputs together, and our design teams have been able to develop specific area plans for a region. So the example on the screen there is a high-level overview of our central Manchester plan, where we've identified significant load growth across the city and targeted investment accordingly to meet that load requirement and the challenge. This ensures that the capacity is available as developments require it to, and ensure that we can continue to roll out low carbon technologies such as EVs and heat pumps and continue on a smooth trajectory, enabling Manchester to meet those tough net zero targets. Now I think we've got a couple more polls at this point. Thank you, Charlotte. That one go through all right? It seemed to zip through very quickly, Charlotte.
It did. There's two that have launched. One, we're asking for kind of if you'd like any further insights in the reports that we're working on for the Cumbria and the Lancashire area. And then the second question is, are you interested in more details focusing on different areas? So if you have any thoughts around either of those, it's more of a word cloud than a poll. So just
right, okay.
Yeah, if you could pop any comments in there, that'd be really appreciated.
I'm good to move on then. So we're back into the NDP. So it focuses on our network development reporting and provides the user with valuable additional information on key projects, which including delivery in terms of the new infrastructure to be installed and upcoming flexible services that we can employ as well. The information provided with the objectives of giving users foresight whether network plans may impact on the developments and signpost requirements for flexibility services, so users can target developments accordingly. The high-level plans for the network intervention and flexible services cover those sort of 1 to 10 year time frame, location of the intervention, right down to primary substation HV bars, development of requirements for flexibility services and new infrastructure, justification and the need for the network developments, and where it resides in the delivery life cycle. So we signpost whether it's an approved plan in delivery, part of our latest development. And we'll have a look at that in a second as we move through. So onto the workbook. So this is the main part we've updated this term and refreshed. We've got 8 tabs within our network headroom report workbook now. The opening page here just gives an overview and links to the pages and the tabs. And I suppose the main update outside of the load and generation forecast that we've pulled through is the inclusion of a transmission headroom indicator tab, which is just at the bottom there, a link to it. So what this is doing is that E&W have 17 grid supply points or GSPs across our network. Now, those of you who are very eagle-eyed will spot there's a slight deliberate typo in this early draft in that Kirkby is missing from that list, which has been rectified in the final version, I like to say. And what this arrives at is an anticipated earliest in-service dates for connections that are quoted here, based on either our existing Appendix G position or the feedback we've received via project progression applications that we've submitted to National Grid. And I'm sure quite a lot of you in the call and anyone who's working in the industry with regard to storage and generation technology will be aware of there are currently huge pressures on the wider transmission network to facilitate these connections. I believe the last figure I heard was around 350 gigawatts of connected and contracted to connect DER and storage on the transmission system at present, and that's a challenge to get that all away. So that's resulted in some very long lead times for projects now connecting in our area due to the extensive transmission reinforcement that's been identified. And you can see on there, there's currently some dates out at 2037 being estimated on applications which progress through a project progression. Now, there's a number of initiatives underway in the industry led by the NGET and NGSO and the ENA as well to address these issues, and hopefully we'll be able to improve on those going forward. But there's just a bit of time to step through that at the time. So just a very quick summary of the workbook. You know, to simply use the workbook, you've got drop-down boxes, so you can just simply use where the little arrow points to there, drop down the primary or the area that you're interested in, and you can pull back the relevant forecast and data. You can also select the technology type if you're looking at generation, so whether you look at synchronous, battery, PV, that sort of type of granularity in there. Now, this is just a little overview of the actual NDP report. So though we haven't made any actual changes here at the actual report function, and the main updates are in the workbook, it's worth flagging up there. So, you know, that's still published on our website there. We've got about 73 pages covering across all our GSPs. And each entry contains a map overview showing the feeding area and picks out the specific sites within that area where we've identified an intervention, and timeframes for that intervention are signposted with regard to our forecast data. Details include the need and when that need first occurs and how much is required. We also include a very high level typical asset solution in there as well, and an overview of the level of flexibility and response required depending on the scenario that's been followed. So where can you find the NDP? Well, we have a dedicated page on our website, and there's a link provided here in these slides, which I think are getting shared afterwards. But if you do have a hunt around our website, you can find a good link to it in there. Now I think I've got one more little poll at the end here before I hand over to Ian. So yeah, did you find the information? So yeah, over 90% yes at the moment. So that's a good turnout. Thank you very much for those responses. And I guess that almost concludes my my short overview there of the NDP workbook. Thanks very much for listening, and I hope this has been useful to you all. And I'll hand over to Ian now.
Thank you very much, Kevin. My name's Ian Povey. I'm the Head of Data Management here at Electricity North West. So I'm here today to talk to you about our data portal. So I'll give you a quick run through about the principles of the data portal, about what's on there now, about what we hope to get on our data portal. And then at the end, I hope to just take you actually into our data portal, show you around, show you what facilities there are and how you can use it. So to kick off, what principles are we operating with our data offering? Well, you may or may not be familiar with the Energy Data Task Force and its 5 recommendations for making data available. We are committed to abiding by those recommendations. There is also Ofgem's data best practice, and we're working towards delivering that as well. So what things can I pick out of that, particularly from the Energy Data Task Force? And the first one I'd like to make clear is the data that we want to provide our data in a presumed open manner. And to facilitate this, we've now put a license against our data on our data portal. It's called a Creative Commons Attribution License. Basically it means that the data that you can find on our website is free to use for whatever purposes you want, commercial or otherwise. All that we ask is that you attribute the data source to ANW, but otherwise all the data that you'll find on our portal is free for you to use. One of the things that is important is that our data is fully visible. People know what data is there. So we have on our portal a data catalogue, which is growing all the time. And that data catalogue has adopted the Dublin Core metadata standard for describing all our data sets. So that is there as we speak. We're looking at how we digitalize our network. I'll talk later about what we're hoping to do in the future as regards to the common information model. We're looking to make all our models available in a standard format. And in terms of standardization, ENW is committed to working with all the other DNOs in providing a standardization of offering. So you'll find that through the Energy Networks Association working groups, we have been collaborating to make sure that each DNO is offering data in a standard that is the same across the whole industry. Visibility of infrastructure and assets. We kind of led the way on this from 10 years or more ago by providing our data in a digital format. Things have moved on from that, and I'll be taking you through that as we go through the presentation. Okay, move on. So what's in our data portal? You've already heard from Christos talking about the DFES. Well, all that information about our DFES and all the workbooks behind it are all in our data portal. Gavin has talked about the network development plan, and he also referenced, I noted, the long-term development plan. Those are in our data portal and can be easily accessed. We have what we call our network asset viewer. That's basically it's a window into our GIS or graphical information system data, so people can see what cables we've got and where they are on our network, and they can use that for many different purposes, for planning purposes, but also you know, if they want to find out what equipment we've got in the ground if they're working in that area. After my presentation, you'll be spoken to by Kate. She'll be talking to you about flexible services. So flexible services and all the data around that, again, you'll find on our portal. And you'll also find our embedded capacity register, which is a register that that details all our generation connecting to our network, and anybody who's got any flexible service contracts with us are also in the embedded capacity register. And finally, we've got the operational data. That data is again standardized across the industry. It's data that we've been making available along with all the other DNOs about what's happening on our network. So we publish what we call boundary flows. That is the energy flowing in at our grid supply points. We've also published data on our outages on the network. That would be both planned and fault outages, so that people can see what sort of reliability you've got in certain areas. In terms of how we make this data available, there's a few different methods in which we've done that. There's the traditional spreadsheet format, which you'll find is in current use for the long-term development statement. We've also provided visualization or map backgrounds. And finally, we've got API format for anybody who wants to download that information in that manner. So what data, I told you what I've got on there now, what have we got in the future? Well, we aim to make more of our network and operational data available on the portal. So it's fair to say that in terms of our portal, we're at the start of a journey now, and we're hoping to expand the data offering as time progresses. So, for instance, the embedded capacity register at the moment is just any assets over 1 megawatt in registered capacity. But we're looking to expand that to include all assets with a registered capacity of 50 kVA and above. So that will happen this year. And we're looking to incorporate more and more of our operational data as and when we can make that available. One area where E&W have been quite at the front of developing is adopting the Common Information Model format. We have raised modifications to the grid code so that we will be exchanging data with National Grid in a Common Information Model format, and that we intend to make also available on our website towards the end of this year. I mentioned before that at the moment the long-term development statement is predominantly in a format that is Excel spreadsheet driven. There is a review group led by Ofgem, which we are party to, which is looking to change the method of delivery and again move it towards provision of common information models so that people can take working models of our network right down to HV and do load flow analysis on their own software tools. So this is something that we are working towards with Ofgem. We will make it available down to HV when we know exactly what the scope of the model will be. We are looking to make the higher voltage networks available towards the end of this year. Ahead of Ofgem making a license change as to what we need to produce, we will do so in advance of that and then modify our output to make sure that it complies with our license requirements. So I think one big question for everyone that's here today is we're at the start of a journey. We're looking to incorporate more and more data in more and more flexible formats. So we'd like to hear from you to say, what data would you like to see and in what format? So if you want to drop it in the chat, great. If you want to contact us, please do so. What I want to do now is just take you into our data portal and give you a bit of a tour. So if you bear with me a moment, I want to share a different screen so that I can take you into our portal. Right, hopefully you can all now see the Electricity Northwest web page. This is the web page. If you search for us, this is the one that you'll find as the opening page. So to find our data portal, you need to go to Go Net Zero, and then you'll see data portal. So, as I say, the data portal here is very much work in progress. What we've got here are our standard offerings where you've got the spreadsheets in the normal format, and you can go in and see network data in here. You'll find the long-term development statement. You'll find the embedded capacity register. But this is in the traditional format. Going back, you'll see a large one that says visit our data portal. So we've moved a lot of this data that was on our existing website into our data portal. We are working with a company or partnering with a company called Open Datasoft, and what this will do is allow you much more to see much more of our data and to use that data in any ways that you wish, and combine data sets and customize the views that you want to see. So, as you can see here, we've got our, you'll see at the top of the page, it says sign up. If you don't sign up, you can still use and access all the data that we've made available. But by signing up, it allows you then to, it gives you space to customize the views, combine data sets, and then save them so that you can come back and don't have to start again, which you would have to do if you hadn't signed up. So I'll take you through that in a moment. I'll just show you what data sets are available. So we've got our embedded capacity register, and we've got that as a data set which you can download either through our API, and you can see all the different parts to the embedded capacity register. And we've got that same data on a map. So you can click in here. This shows you roughly how many we've got, how many embedded generation we've got on our network. You'll notice we've got some out in the Irish Sea, and that's perfectly correct. That's an offshore wind farm connecting to our network. As you zoom in or out, you'll see that then you can search on individual ones, click on those, and get the information about those embedded generation sites. So that will be our embedded capacity register. Moving down, we've got our HV capacity map. What this is for all our network, you can go into this map, and you can see our network, and it will give you a red, amber, and green indication of how highly that network is loaded and what capacity you can see on there. So in this particular area of Manchester, the cables are all in the green zone. That means they are up to 80% loaded, and therefore have a degree of spare capacity. The way the capacity is worked out is to say what is the physical capacity of the circuit, and then only take 2/3 of that, because each circuit has to operate as a backfeed for others in the eventuality of any faults. So we've got 2/3 of that capacity available, and then we compare that with the actual peak loading on that circuit and give you a red, amber, green status. We welcome feedback as to whether you think that is useful. Are the red, amber, green categories at the right levels? Please provide feedback on that. You can get all that data in the chart format, and you can download that through our API. As I said before, you're going to hear from Kate soon, and she's going to be talking about flexibility services. So all the data that Kate will talk to you about, and I will not steal Kate's thunder, but all the data that she talks to you about is available here. So you can see by looking at the map, we've got areas where we're looking for contribution of flexible services. And as you zoom in, you get more and more detail on that, and it tells you in that area there what we're looking for. We also have available for everyone the ENW network asset viewer. As I said before, this is a window into our GIS information. So I've prepared before. You can now see all the tables and where they are in geographic accuracy on our network. So that is available for everyone. There is currently a password on there, but we provide the password. We're looking to take that off. But at the moment, everyone is given a password as you navigate to the site. So I will show you that. So if you go in there, you'll see everyone's got the username general.user and that password. If everyone uses that, you can get in there. We will be looking to take that password off there as soon as we can. Again, the long-term development statement and the data tables behind there are available in this area of the data portal. What that means is you can combine long-term development statement data with the distribution future energy scenarios data in any method that you want, and you can get visualization on that. So all that is available. Similarly, the network development plan data can be combined with all of these data sets. So any data set in here can be combined to produce customization for whatever purpose you wish. Again, we've got and this is where we've got the outage data and we've got the GSP boundary flow. More than happy for you to take a look around that and view that at your leisure. One thing I would say is we are also contributing, not just through our data portal, but we're contributing to national pieces of work to provide a view on our network assets. You may or may not be aware of the National Underground Asset Register, which is kind of misleading because I think we've now got overhead network on there as well. But we will be shortly contributing to that national data set. At the moment, 3 areas have piloted it, and we are going to be coming in next. So that was a quick view of the data portal. If there's any questions you have for me, I'd be happy to take those. I'll look through the chat while Kate's talking to see if there's any questions that I can answer right here and now. And if I can't answer them, I will definitely come back to you with an answer. Okay, I think it's about time for me to hand over to Kate and let Kate talk to you about the flexible services offering we have. Thank you.
Thank you. There's quite a few questions in the chat, Ian, so thanks for your presentation there. If you could just go head over to the chat. I'm going to start sharing Kate's slides now.
Charlotte, I'm going to have to head off. Okay, but thanks for the presentation so far. It's been very useful. I've put one or two questions in the chat there that I'm sure that you'll get back to me through to Christos, because I actually deal with Christoph quite closely on future TFGM asset infrastructure renewals. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining today.
Cheers, bye.
So I'm just uploading that slide deck. It can sometimes take a little time to load. While we wait, we do have thinking about the data portal, and we've discussed the NDP earlier today. Would you like to see the a heat map visual of the data contained in the NDP? I'm just going to launch that poll. Give it a moment, get some responses, and to follow that, we'd like to know if you would like to see it as a heat map, what would you like to see contained. I'll launch the poll now, and the two will be live in the chat. Apologies for the time it's taking to share these slides. Looks like we've got them now. So I'll hand you over to Kate.
Thanks, Lottie. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Stewart. I'm going to talk you through flexible services. So I know some of you might already be familiar, but just in case you're new to the market, I'll just give a brief introduction. So what are flexibility services or flexible services? Network operators like Electricity North West use flexibility services to help manage forecasted congestion on the network. It's an alternative to traditional reinforcement. So rather than going down the traditional reinforcement route, which can cost a lot, it takes a long time as well, and it is disruptive. Flexibility services are a great alternative to alleviate constraints. They can be provided by companies or individual customers who own assets in our region and who are capable of flexing their energy usage up or down when we ask them to. And flexibility services allow us to balance supply and demand to ensure that we can offer our customers a safe and reliable network. We do pay flexibility providers for these services, so it is also a great kind of extra revenue stream for companies. So what are the benefits of flexible services compared to traditional reinforcement? So first of all, it allows us to utilise our existing assets on our network rather than building new ones, which is obviously really expensive, takes a long time. And by avoiding that reinforcement, it reduces our carbon impact. And we also will see a reduction in power cuts. So it does offer a more reliable network for our customers. It supports local businesses and community energy groups, and it also encourages the adoption of low carbon technologies. Obviously, with the UK's very ambitious decarbonisation targets, we're going to see a huge uptake in low carbon technologies. And by procuring flexible services, we're opening up more capacity on the network to allow those technologies to connect. And yeah, as I mentioned before, they're a lot less disruptive than reinforcing the network. So obviously reinforcing, you're going to see a lot of traffic disruption, and it costs a lot more, which then ends up costing customers more in their bills. So by deferring and avoiding reinforcement, it allows cheaper bills for customers. Who can provide flexible services? So flexible services are location specific, meaning that you would have to have an asset or be planning to build an asset in an area of our region where we have a requirement. And anyone that is capable of adjusting how much electricity they consume or generate, so being able to flex their energy usage up and down when we ask them to, can participate. Our current minimum requirement for participation is 50 kilowatt. We are looking to reduce that further. It started off at 100 and we have reduced it to 50. And if you're not able to provide 50 kilowatts of flexible capacity, you can still participate as part of an aggregated portfolio. And and industrial and commercial assets can also participate as well. So these are just a couple of examples of flexible services to give you a better idea. So you can turn your demand down by turning off or shifting intensive processes, such as ovens and fridges, controlling heating systems such as heat pumps, and by switching off or turning down EV charge points. You can also increase generation, so renewable generation such as wind and solar, battery storage, which works best with standby and backup generation. And we also do allow energy efficiency measures to participate in our tenders. So obviously, if you can install things like solar panels, insulation, or LED lighting, which decrease your long-term energy usage, you are still providing extra capacity to the network, so you can still participate using energy efficiency measures. There's a link there at the bottom of that slide to our case studies as well. We've developed a few case studies with examples of each of these types of flexible services, just to give you an even better idea of the entire process from start to finish. So this is what we have done so far since we, Electricity North West, started procuring flexible services in 2018. So it's still a relatively new market. And since then, we've carried out 12 tenders. Our current spring 2023 tender is our 12th and largest tender to date. And we've procured these 12 tenders across 46 different locations in the Northwest, totaling 3,600 megawatts of requirements. These are our current requirements. So our spring 2023 tender launched at the end of March, and it's open until the end of June. So it's a 3-month window to participate. And this tender is procuring flexibility in 32 locations across the Northwest. And we're asking for a total of 1,097 megawatts of capacity, flexible capacity, and we are offering just over 10 million for these services. And this tender will go from 2023 to 28, so it spans 5 years. This is a breakdown of that overview I just gave of our current tender by region. So this shows a breakdown for Cumbria, Greater Manchester and Lancashire. So you'll see Cumbria and Greater Manchester have a very similar amount of capacity requirements, with 18 locations, 10 locations, and around 500 megawatts each. And then Lancashire has 4 locations and 93 megawatts. And there's also just a breakdown of the cost available in each of those regions. So here is an overview of the products that we procure. These are industry standard, agreed by all DNOs. We procure 4 of the products, and they are Sustain, Secure, Dynamic and Restore. And the yellow circles just indicate how many of each of those products or response types we're asking for in our current tender. So you'll notice we don't currently have any requirements for Sustain. Sustain and Secure are pre-fault, meaning they're scheduled in advance. Sustain is more of a continuous requirement response type, and currently we don't have any requirements for Sustain. But Secure is a similar product. We use that to avoid a loss of supply during things like planned outages and typical peaks in winter, for instance, or televised events like the coronation will be a big one where everyone switches their television on at the same time. So Secure is used to manage kind of forecasted outages. Dynamic and Restore are post-fault, so they can't be scheduled in advance. They are reacting to an abnormality on the network. So we don't know when they're going to happen. It's when something goes wrong on the network. The dynamic we use to avoid a loss of supply to customers, and restore we use when there is already a loss of supply to customers and we need to get those customers back on as efficiently as possible. So we would ask flexibility providers to stay off supply until those customers are back on. For secure and dynamic, we offer an availability and a utilization cost. So we would pay the provider to be available in case we need them. Sustain and restore are utilization only. And also you can use energy efficiency measures through any of these products for our tenders. So just to go through where we signpost our requirements, so where you can find all the information you need. And first off is our website. So we have a flexible services portal on the Electricity Northwest website. It has all the information you need, including an interactive flexibility map that shows you all of our current requirements, which are the navy icons you can see there, and for each product. So each symbol represents a different product. And if you click on any of those symbols, it expands this box, which gives you sort of a breakdown of those requirements for each zone. So it will have things like service windows that you would need to be available, the cost available, the response type required. It kind of gives you every bit of information. And this information is also available on Picklo Flex, where we procure our flexible services, except it doesn't give you indications of our future requirements, which we show on our map in the grey icons. So those are indications of requirements for the next 5 to 10 years, and they have been identified in the network development plan. So if you're thinking of building an asset in our region, it gives you a good indication of where we will be requiring flexible services. On our current requirements page, so at the moment it's called Spring 2023 requirement, you will see our invitation to tender, which is the terms and conditions of our current tender. And then there's an appendices. So our standard flexibility agreement is the common agreement used by all DNOs in the UK. And this is the contract you'll sign if you are successful in the bidding stage. Appendix 2 is the technical specification. So these are the technical requirements that your asset would need to pass in order to provide the flexible capacity. Appendix 3 is site requirements. So the site requirements is basically what it shows on our interactive map, but in tabular form. So if you prefer to just see everything together in one document, then it's kind of easy to refer to. Appendix 4 is half-hourly requirements, and because this current tender is asking for flexible services for the next 5 years, we have published those half-hourly requirements for 5 years. So it's quite a large spreadsheet, but you might find it useful. Our postcode checker tool is a really quick and easy way of checking if your asset falls within a requirement zone. So if you're not sure and you don't want to waste loads of time researching or going onto Picklo and participating, you can quickly check beforehand if you're eligible to participate by just popping in your postcode of where your asset's located, and it will let you know. And the cost calculator tool is also quite a relatively new tool that we developed to provide flexibility providers with an indication of a good bid price, because beforehand we were receiving bids that were outside of our budget and therefore they would be rejected. So to avoid that, it's just a really good indicator of a bid price that falls within our budget for each zone. And then there's a link there at the bottom that takes you to our latest requirement page with all that information on it. So we also signpost and procure on Picklo Flex. So you'll want to go to Picklo Flex if you are interested in participating in our tenders. And before each tender opens, you can sign up to their free dynamic purchasing system. So this is the company qualification step before you can participate. You can do that at any time, but if it's been more than 12 months since you last signed up to the DPS, you will need to resubmit. And you'll then want to upload your assets, and you might also need to update them if you already have assets uploaded, and complete the pre-qualification questionnaire. So this step used to be on the Electricity Northwest website, but now it's much easier. Everything's just in one place. So you'll notice from this tender round, the process is a lot more streamlined. So that's now completed on Piclo as well. And Piclo introduced a new step to confirm your participation in the competition. So this is just confirming which assets you want to put forward in the competition, whether you want to confirm their participation or you can also withdraw from competition. And then the last step is just submitting a bid. And then if your bid is successful, you will enter into contract with Electricity Northwest. There's just a link at the bottom there. If you need any support while using Piclo, you can email support@Piclo Flex and they'll be more than happy to help. They do also have quite a few demos on their YouTube channel that are quite useful. So Ian gave you a demo of our new open data portal earlier on. And he showed you our flexible services map. And this is an additional platform to view our flexible services on. You can just choose, you don't have to obviously use all of them, whichever one works best for you. And this allows you to download all of our data sets and, invitation to tender data in whatever format works best for you. So whether it's CSV or Excel shapefile via API, you now have so many different options. So we're hopeful that this will kind of help just to open up the requirements. And yeah, you don't, as I said before, you don't have to go to all the different platforms, just whichever suits best. But just a note actually on that, you still need to go to Piclo Flex to participate. So our requirements are signposted in those different areas, but it's always Piclo Flex that you'll need to go to take part. So this is just a timeline of each tender. So we procure flexibility services twice a year in spring and autumn. So in March and October. And the participation windows are open for 3 months. So you have 3 months to sign up to the DPS and submit a PQQ and to review all of our requirements in our ITT. And then the bidding window opens for a couple of weeks. And then the bidding window will close and we will review all the bids, and then any successful participants we will enter into contract with. So that's just a useful timeline so that you are aware of all the deadlines, in particular DPS and PQQ. We do have different deadlines for the DPS and PQQ because your company needs to have qualified before you can submit a PQQ. So that's just good to keep in mind. And these are just a couple of recent updates for everyone. So in March, we have we published our latest distribution flexibility procurement statement. So this is our third statement that we've published. So Ofgem introduced a new license condition 31E, procurement of use and distribution flexibility services. This sets out our plans for procuring flexibility services in the upcoming year. So it's a bit of a looking forward plan, and it's a great overview of how we procure flexible services, our vision for flexible services, our plans for the next year. So anyone new to flexible services, if you've got any questions or about anything to do with how we procure flexible services. It's a really good document to have a look at, because it covers a bit of everything. And then the procurement report will be published at the end of April, and that's more of a looking back report on the previous regulatory year. And that is a really good kind of overview of what we procured, dispatched, and contracted in the previous year in comparison to what we set out to do in our previous statement as well. So I definitely recommend to check that out, and that has been published in our new document library. The document library houses all of our flexibility documents in one place. And we also have an exciting event coming up in London, and this is in collaboration with PICLO and SB Energy Networks and UKPN. So this is an in-person event. It's free to attend, and it's going to be on Wednesday, the 24th of May from 10 AM. And this event is very much a collaborative event with stakeholders. We're keen to talk and get any feedback. It's going to be kind of based on roundtable discussions, panel discussions, and industry updates. It's not going to be just us presenting to you. So we would love to see you there if you are interested. The link is provided here. It's posted on Eventbrite to sign up to attend. So hopefully you can make that. It's at Coyne Street Community Centre. And just to finish off, we've got some useful links. So if you have any questions or feedback for us, these are the links that you can use. The first one is for PICLO Flex. And so as I mentioned earlier, if you're at all interested in taking part in our tenders, I would recommend heading over there, registering and signing up to the DPS. Our flexible services website on Electricity Northwest has all of the information you need. If there is anything missing, please let us know. We're always looking at ways of kind of expanding our offering. So please let us know if there's anything that we can add. We do also offer one-to-one discussions. They're complimentary. And so if you are applying and you're really not sure about something or how to fill out any of the questionnaires, you can book in for a one-to-one with our team, and we'll guide you through the process of providing flexibility. You can register for updates. So we send out quarterly newsletters and event invites and any kind of large updates to our distribution list. So if you're not already on the flexible services list and you are interested in being kept in the loop, then definitely sign up to that. And finally, we have a feedback form. So if you have any feedback in relation to anything flexible services, please just fill that out and a member of our team will get back to you. I think that's everything. Yeah. Back to you, Lottie.
So now I'd like to open up for any questions and answers. The chat's been great, so thank you so much for all your questions. But if you'd like to take yourself off mute or continue to use the chat, just open up now.